you ask any Christian what's one book of the Bible they avoid the most, they're probably going to say the book of Revelation. And that's because this book gives you all the terrifying details of the end of the world, and that includes a bunch of plagues and natural disasters and this creepy Antichrist figure, which is also why I have avoided this book for the longest time. But in this video, I'm finally going to be reading this book and seeing if it's actually as scary as everyone says it is. And little did I know that this book would be even more intimidating than I thought, so much so that halfway through I had to take a pause from even reading it, though I ended up being equally as surprised at how big of a turn this book takes and how hopeful and exciting it actually becomes. And through all this, I kept a running list on my phone of all the prophecies I saw that seemed to be happening today, and I'll share them all with you by the end of this video, so keep watching for that. I had kind of been avoiding starting this book over the past couple of days now because, number one, I knew that it was going to be really hard to understand, but I wanted to understand it, so I just knew it was going to be a big challenge. And then also, number two, I was really preparing for all of the scary things in this book, and it just made me not really want to read it, but I know that deep down I do want to read it because I do want to understand it. I had kind of been avoiding it, but today I just decided, you know what, I'll just read one page. If I can just get through one page and at least just start it, that'll be an accomplishment in and of itself. And so I started it this morning with that perspective, and I actually read a lot more than I had planned to read, and so far it's not as bad as I thought. So just in brief, so far Revelation is written by John, who wrote the book of John, and it's basically when he's a prisoner exiled on an island somewhere, and it says as he's on this island he has this vision of Jesus just shows up to him, and to me it's a picture of him that's kind of hard to imagine. It says his eyes are like flames of fire and there's a sword coming out of his mouth, and his hair was white and his feet were like polished bronze. Anyway, he's told to write this vision down and to write down everything he hears, and so far it's all just starting with some specific messages to 7 different churches at the time, kind of like critiquing these churches and telling them what they shouldn't be doing anymore. And there's just this long section, it's several pages of just describing some things that need to be changed within these churches, and I haven't been having too hard of a time understanding it or enjoying it. It's pretty interesting to me, so far so good. So everything started off really well, and for a second there I was really questioning whether Revelation was really as bad as people made it out to be. But then later that night, as I continued reading, the book very quickly took a sudden turn and things got so much more intense. So it has officially begun. It started last night and now I've been reading a little bit more this morning, and it's just getting more and more intense as the pages go on. So after all of the critiques of the churches, then John starts observing this future prophecy of what's going to happen at some point in the future. So it starts off with describing this scroll, and the scroll has 7 different seals on it, and it's very necessary that the scroll gets like opened up. And at first I didn't really understand what any of this means. I've actually read Revelation before, but I've just always read it for like what it was and just kind of moved on if I didn't understand anything, but I didn't want to do that this time. So I've been looking up things as I've been going, and apparently the scroll represents like the wrath of God. And at first John himself starts crying because he's so upset that no one can open this scroll. And from what I can tell, I think the reason for that is because the wrath of God is so necessary in order to end all evil. So to John, if nobody can open up the scroll, that means evil is going to live on forever. But thankfully, a lamb comes on the scene who pretty sure is supposed to represent Jesus, and he can open the scroll. And now each of the seals are being opened one by one, and each of them represent a new like section of God's wrath. Trying to understand things, a little confused here and there, but we're officially getting into the serious stuff. And I'm a little worried, but also pretty excited to get more into it. Okay, I'm gonna try my best to explain where I'm at so far. So, one of the seals of the scroll has been opened, and that has initiated like the beginning of God's judgment on the earth. So it starts with a man coming on a white horse, and he has a crown on his head, and he rides out to win many battles. And at first I was like, is this Jesus? Like, who is this? But the more I read, the more I'm realizing that I think this is the Antichrist, someone who's appearing to be really powerful, and he's kind of taking over the world. world. And that's where it begins. And then it just gets worse from there because there are earthquakes. The moon becomes as red as blood. The sun goes completely black. And then the stars start falling out of the sky. It says that whole islands and mountains are moved from their places. And it seems like the people on Earth are starting to realize that God's wrath has come. And everyone's running and hiding from it. So within all that, each of the first 6 seals are being broken. But then when it comes to the 7th seal, it says that there's complete silence in heaven for about half an hour. And within this 7th seal, this final judgment, comes 7 trumpets. There's so many 7s in this book. And I think that's because 7 is like the number of completion in the Bible. And obviously Revelation is like the end of everything, the completion of everything. And I think that's why there's so many 7s. But like I said, within the 7th seal, there are 7 trumpets that are given to 7 angels. And with each trumpet blast comes more wrath from God. And now I'm working through all of the judgment of these trumpets. And honestly, they're just getting worse and worse. Also, keep in mind that as I'm reading and researching, I'm keeping a list on my phone of all the things that I'm noticing might actually be happening today. And there's already a list of several things. And I'm going to explain all of those at the end of the video. As you have seen, kind of, I've been sitting here for a long time just on my computer trying to figure so much of this stuff out, and I'll be honest, I've been kind of getting into a rabbit hole. It's like I look up one thing and I start to learn about so many other things, and then I go down these rabbit trails of just so much stuff. It's like gonna be so hard to explain everything that I'm learning about because there's, again, just so much stuff. Right now specifically, I'm so curious about the catching away, which is like the harvest Jesus talks about in the Gospels, and I ended up actually going back and reading some of the book of Daniel and in Thessalonians because now I'm just really curious about all of that. There's a big debate about whether they think the catching away is going to be pre-tribulation or post-tribulation, and I'm just trying to learn more about all the points about that. So I've been not reading quite as much and mostly just researching and, like I said, going down rabbit trails and honestly getting distracted, but it's good. I like that I'm learning so much more. I can tell that I'm understanding what's going on more than I ever have before in this book, and that's super exciting. Maybe I also just needed a bit of a break from all the doom and gloom, but I'm about to get back to it and start reading more about these trumpets. Can't wait. Okay, so just a little summary so far. What has happened is Jesus critiqued a lot of churches. Then John has a vision of a scroll with a bunch of seals on it. Jesus comes and starts breaking open the seals and letting God's wrath loose on the world. In the beginning, the Antichrist figure comes and deceives a lot of people. Then as the 7th and final seal is being opened up, it initiates these 7 different trumpets to be blown, and each trumpet represents even more wrath from God. Then come one of the most surprising things to me, which is a plague of locusts. They're everywhere and they're tormenting people. It says that they were given the power to sting like scorpions. They looked like horses and had gold crowns on their head. Their faces looked like human faces, and they wore armor made of iron, and their wings roared like an army of chariots rushing into battle. And for 5 months they had the power to torment people. That so far has been the most unexpected thing. But continuing on, there's also a terrible hailstorm and thunder and lightning. There are 2 witnesses during this time who die but then come back to life. There's honestly just so much, it's even hard to explain them all here, but basically just a lot of tribulation, which is what they call it. Then I've just gotten to this part about a woman and a dragon, and it seems very metaphorical, and I'm still trying to understand exactly what it's all representing, but I think there's a lot of deep metaphor here that I really do want to understand, so I'm gonna figure that out. Okay, so basically this section is where John has a vision of a woman and a dragon. And the woman has a baby and the dragon is there waiting to devour it as soon as it's born. But instead of the dragon getting it, God snatches the baby away and brings it up to heaven. But it seems, at least on the surface, that this woman represents Israel as a whole, and the son she has represents Jesus, who instead of being devoured by sin, who I think is the dragon, goes instead to heaven. And then this causes some kind of spiritual war. And it's just getting very complicated. Even as I'm saying this, I'm like, does anybody care or is anyone paying attention? Because it is like a lot, and it's very just, even though it makes sense, it's still very just like weird and kind of daunting to read a lot of all in one day. And so I think I might pause on this for the rest of today and just kind of take in what I have learned so far. Hopefully this isn't too much of like a down video. I know it's like very complex, very hard to understand, and also when you do understand it, some of it is a bit depressing. I do still want to finish the book, and I'll probably finish it up tomorrow, but I feel like I need a bit of a break from it for now, so I'm gonna do that. What's funny is that looking back, I stopped right before it started getting really, really good, because I didn't know at the time, but in the next couple of chapters of this book, there would come one of the most exciting, uplifting parts of arguably the entire Bible. But I didn't realize at the time that this was right around the corner. I kind of thought that there was a lot more wrath and sadness to go, and so I kind of held off on finishing it for a little while. I even avoided it a lot the next day. Instead, I went to the bookstore and tried to look for Revelation commentaries. I even went on a walk. I was just kind of like avoiding it, but I'm so happy that after all of that, I did finally go back to it, and I was really, really surprised at what I found. So I will admit that I've been avoiding finishing this book for a few days now, but I got up today and decided to just keep reading, and I'm so happy that I did. I mean, I really stopped at the worst part because all of the most amazing things are starting to happen. First of all, Jesus is returning, and in the midst of all these terrible things that are happening, he's gonna come down onto a mountain, Mount Zion it says, and he's changing the course of everything. I've only read a little bit so far, but I really just wanted to film because of how excited I am. There's a harvest of everyone on earth. They're dividing people from those who have the quote-unquote mark of the beast, which I don't know if I talked about. That's also a whole thing. Some people have a mark on their foreheads or on their right hand that like shows their loyalty to the Antichrist or whatever, and he's basically separating those people from those who are loyal to God. And then all the angels start singing a song because of how excited they are. It says it's the song of Moses. It just seems like such a happy time because it's finally all over, and this is like the beginning of the end of all evil things. There's still a lot left for me to read, so I'm gonna keep going with that, but it's so exciting. I've read the next 2 chapters. A lot has happened. Jesus has defeated Satan. He's chained him up, thrown him in a pit, but the pit is apparently temporary because that's not the final defeat. But anyway, while he's chained up, Jesus comes onto earth and he rules for 1,000 years. And it seems like because all evil is chained up in a way that the earth is going to be a sinless place. Like I'm imagining maybe like the way that the Garden of Eden was, but without the bad tree. It seems like some people even who are very persecuted for their faith are ruling with Jesus. And this also fulfills a lot of prophecies that were said in earlier books, like Isaiah talks about this some, Ezekiel I think talks about it a little bit, but there is still more to come because like I said, Satan hasn't been fully defeated yet. So, and I'm almost there, and I'm actually almost done with this book. I think I have 2 chapters left. I'm so excited to see how it finally ends. I think I kind of know, but I'm excited to read it and actually like learn it. And then I'm going to talk about my little list that I've been making on my phone of things that seem to be happening today. Could be wrong, I don't know, but I'll tell you what I found. It didn't take me too long to finish this book. There wasn't that much left, and this is just the good part, so it's easier to go quickly through this. So basically what happens after those 1,000 years of Jesus reigning, then he allows Satan to come out of this pit that he's been chained up in. And he attempts to gather people and wage one last war against Jesus. And really quickly, within like 2 lines, Jesus obviously defeats him. And then he gets sent immediately to the lake of fire, Satan does, where he will spend the rest of eternity. And then all of the bad, all of the scariness is over. It's done. It says that God's gonna create a new Jerusalem, which is basically a new heaven and a new earth together in one. It's referred to as a holy city. It's a beautiful place. It like describes what it looks like. There's a river of life flowing through it. On each side of the river is a tree of life, which ties all the way back in the beginning of Genesis where there's a tree of life. It says that no longer will there be a curse upon anything, for the throne of God and of the Lamb will be there, and there will be no night there, for there's no need for lamps or the sun, for the Lord God will shine on them, and he will reign forever and ever. And there's just like so much hope in these final few chapters. Also, one of my favorite verses just says, he will wipe every tear from their eyes, and there will be no more death or sorrow or crying or pain. All these things are gone forever. And then at the very last little bit of this book, Jesus actually talks, and he really like hammers in the idea of like, I'm coming so soon. He says it several times over again, and he talks a lot about being ready and prepared for when he does come. In 1 Thessalonians, it says that when he comes back, he's going to come back with a commanding shout, the voice of the archangel, and with a trumpet call of God. When I read that verse, it reminded me a lot of when Jesus, in one of the Gospels, I can't remember where, he says, my sheep know my voice. And this commanding shout, this call from heaven kind of reminded me of that. I think a huge part of being ready means knowing God, among other things. But again, in this final chapter in Revelation, there's such an urgency of being prepared, because he says over and over again, he's coming soon. And it's interesting because the last thing that Jesus says in this book and in the entire Bible, because it's the ending of the last book of the Bible, he just says, yes, I am coming soon. It seems like it's one of the biggest things he wants us to remember and to rest assured in. I'm so happy I continued to read through this book. I'm so happy it got so much better towards the end. I'm so happy with how encouraging this book actually is. And when you know the book really well, you can see that when the hard stuff does come, it should be encouraging and hopeful, because you know that means the good stuff must come after. So anyway, that being said, I might read over this last chapter one more time because I really like it. And then I'm going to talk about my list. It's very important, but I'm going to read a little bit more first. It's finally time to talk about the list. Now, disclaimer, I don't know what I'm talking about. Like I said, this was just for funsies. These were just little things that I noticed while reading through the book of Revelation that seemed a little bit familiar. Or a couple things are things that I found out as I was doing research to try and understand this book a little bit better. Also, I'm aware that a few things on this list are things that, yes, are happening now, but have always kind of been happening. But again, I just thought it was kind of fun to keep up with. So, number 1 and number 2 on the list are pretty obvious. They're very basic things, but Jesus says in, I think, Luke, that when the time is near, there's going to be earthquakes, as well as threats of wars and rumors of wars. And then a pretty big one I found out actually happened a while ago, but it's still really interesting. Isaiah talks a lot about Israel becoming its own country again, and specifically saying that it'll become its own country in the span of a day. And apparently that happened like in the 1940s. It became its own country again in like a day, which is pretty crazy. Another one that's a little more prevalent right now is Israel being the center of global conflict. And then the last one is that in the book of Revelation, there's this temple, this third temple, that plays a huge role in a lot of the things that are going to happen. And apparently right now in Israel, a third temple is currently being made, which I find very interesting. So that's my little list. Again, I know a lot of these things have been happening since the beginning of time. Again, I'm pretty new to all of this, so I'm just really hoping that I didn't say anything wrong throughout this video. But really, my biggest intent with all of this, something that I hope everyone takes from this more than anything else, is that when Jesus does eventually come back, even though it might seem like a scary time, we don't have to fear, because we know that he's completely in charge. So I think that's all. Thank you for watching, and goodbye. Bye.